This is a CC Radio podcast. Welcome to the show, everyone. You are listening to Believe, Australian Paranormal and UFO Radio. My name is Cade Moyer, and thanks for tuning in. If you've had an encounter, get in touch with me. My email address is believe@ccradio.com.au, or you can message me on Facebook at facebook.com/Believe UFO Radio. If you enjoy this episode, there are a few things you can do to help the show. Firstly, you can go to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating and review. Or you can share the show around social media with your friends and family, and that would help us grow. Thanks for joining me tonight. I have got a great episode lined up for you. Tonight, I have Selene joining me, and she is one of the investigators from Haunted Down Under. Selene comes on the show to share some of the hair-raising encounters she's had since venturing into the world of the paranormal. Now, if you haven't heard of Haunted Down Under, you really do have to check them out on Facebook. They actually do live broadcasts of their investigations on Facebook about once a month, and because it's live streamed, it's actually pretty scary. It's a really good thing, so you need to go check that out. But before we get into that, let's talk about the iTunes 5-star ratings and reviews. So as you know, each week I read out a new 5-star review that's left for me on iTunes. So if you want your review read out, simply jump on iTunes and leave me a 5-star review, letting me know what you enjoy about the show, and I might just read it out on the next episode. Now, this one actually comes in from someone who's been on the show. This comes from Belle Conway, and she was actually on episode 4, which is an absolutely fantastic episode. It's the one we get the most downloads on. People seem to love it because it got a lot of media coverage. It was on the news, in newspapers. It's on this show. And she basically had a really, really terrifying UFO encounter with her husband. So I'm going to read out what she left for us on iTunes. I would like to thank you for allowing me to share my story, which I thought I would never talk about in public. I didn't realize how your show has helped me. Reading the reviews after my interview was interesting to see so many positive comments. It made me feel like I'm not the only one who believes in UFOs or have witnessed such an amazing unknown thing. You just can't explain to people without them believing in you. Australians need a show like yours to tell their untold stories. Believe in them because they are true. Kind regards, Belle Conway. I really want to thank you, Belle, because that's fantastic. And it's really why we do this show, is to really raise awareness of what's going on out in Australia, because not a lot of people would actually believe people's stories. And that's why we're here. We want to be the sounding board. So if you're like Belle and you've had an encounter, reach out to me. Do it on Facebook, do it by email, whatever you do, just get in contact with me. And finally, if you want to chat to the other listeners of the show, simply jump on Facebook and search for the Believe Paranormal and UFO listener community. We're nearly at 200 members. There are some fantastic paranormal discussions going on in there. So if you're interested in that, I'll also include some links in the show notes. But that's enough of me talking. Let's get into Selene's amazing encounters. Tonight, I'm joined by Selene, and Selene is quite an interesting guest because Selene is a ghost hunter from the Facebook, YouTube, TV show called Haunted Down Under. Selene, thanks for joining us.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
No worries at all. How would you describe your show? Is it more YouTube or is it more Facebook? Because you do a lot of live streaming, which is really interesting.
Yeah, we do. So it's sort of a bit of both Facebook and YouTube. So we do the live stream for Facebook, but then following that, we'll sort of go on and film some extra bits and pieces for more evidence, and then we'll condense it all down into a vlog and then release that to YouTube for people to go and watch.
How fascinating. What got you into ghost hunting?
Actually, bit of a funny story. So I was never skeptic, but I was never a believer. I was sort of like sitting on the fence with it all. And then I think it was 2016 or 2017, I had a couple of cousins over, and we actually saw on Facebook an ad for a Halloween ghost hunt that was happening down on the Gold Coast. So I thought because it was local, like we'd go and give it a go. So we went and did that. I wasn't really expecting much, to be honest. I was expecting just sort of, you know, the drama work that they normally do on these ghost tours. And then turned out that it was actually pretty real, and I got a bit of a scare from there. So I kept going along to these ghost tours, and then from there I met Hayley from Haunted Down Under and started becoming friends with her. Later met Caitlin, and then we all became friends, and then they asked me to join Haunted Down Under, and now it's a regular thing for me.
Oh, wow. So you just kind of accidentally fell into it, really?
I did.
And were you much of a believer before you went onto those tours or anything like that?
Look, I wouldn't, if someone had told me that they had an experience, I was never one to be like, oh, you know, it doesn't exist. Because I think it really is one of those things where you have to experience it to believe it. Like, so I was really neither a skeptic nor a believer, but yeah, once I had my own experiences, I could definitely then say, yeah, this is pretty real.
And how long have you been doing ghost hunting for now?
I'd probably say 3 years or so since I started.
Oh, wow.
But with Haunted Down Under, it's sort of been end of last year, early this year that we've been really getting into it.
And I'm sure you've got some hair-raising stories that you could probably tell us from a couple of those outings, I'm sure.
I do, yes.
Do you mind kind of going into some of those for us?
Yeah, for sure. So every place we go is pretty interesting. They've all got their own sort of little stories to go with it. But I think one of the most memorable and frightening ones that I had was we went to a place called the Robles Head Inn, which is in Toowoomba, and I think it was like 150, 160 years old, and it had quite a history to it. So the downstairs area wasn't too bad. Like, there was definitely some activity going on. So I'm a bit of a sensitive myself. So Hayley and I work on the sort of psychic side of things. And first part of the night, we decided to go into the room of the lady that used to be sort of the head of the household there with her husband. And we sat in her little parlour room, and we were using one of our devices to communicate with them. And this one's pretty cool. So it's called the Oracle Box. It's similar to a spirit box, brings through their voice using radio frequency to pick up words and then communicate with us. So we were sitting around using that. I had my back face to the door, and then we sort of shut ourselves into that room to avoid anyone else walking in and interrupting. So I was sitting there, and I got a bit of a fright because the door behind me had opened, and then we turned around, opened the door a little bit further, and no one was there. And then one of the cameramen walked down the hallway, and he said he saw the door open as he was coming down to come and help us film. That was pretty interesting. That actually happened twice. And then later on in the night, we had set up a challenge for ourselves where each person would go and walk up the stairs, which they were very narrow stairs, very, very dark. And then once you hit the top of the stairs, the whole upstairs floor sort of changed in atmosphere. It wasn't as nice and, I suppose, comfortable as the downstairs area was, and it was completely pitch black. So we had gone up, and we just had the face front cameras filming us, and then we had sort of like a night vision camera, and it really didn't give us much to go on. So went to the top, the beginning of the hallway, and our aim was to try and sort of get to the room at the very end of the hallway, which was known to have a bit of activity going on. So that was a card room where the men used to go and, smoke their cigars and play cards and everything. And a few people had some experiences in that room. So we were going to try and walk down the very end. As I started my walk, so because I'm a little bit more sensitive to things that go on, and I'm no more to sort of see figures moving, or I'll get like an image in my head of something happening, for example. So I started my walk down and I just said, you know, if you're there, you can communicate with me, but you cannot hurt me. And as I did, I just had this image of this man, quite a tall man, just start running down the hall to me, and I couldn't take another step because I heard the footsteps coming as well. So I called out to the rest of the team to come up, and I had the shakes walking down the rest of the way. And as we did that, we then went to the room down the very end, the card room, and we just started to do some investigating down there. And I felt a bit of a stinging on the back of my neck, and I quickly put my hand to the back of my neck and said that I was in pain. And when the group checked it out, I had a scratch mark on the back of my neck.
Oh wow!
So that was pretty interesting.
How do you go from that? I mean, because I would have been quite terrified from the encounter up the stairs, and then to kind of go down into the basement and have that happen.
Yeah.
Surely you didn't hang around too much longer.
We did for a bit, actually. It's scary when that happens, but it's also cool because, you know, they're sort of building up, and that's another way of them trying to communicate with you, whether they want you to know that they're there or they want you to get out. We sort of like to know what's going on and see if we can get some more evidence. So, yeah.
And do you ever feel, well, I guess in this scenario, in this investigation in Toowoomba, did you ever feel in danger or anything like that?
I did when I felt that the man was running at me from the end of the hallway. So, like I said, the downstairs area didn't feel too bad. It definitely felt like there was something going on. We heard things and we saw things going on, but nothing that would be, I suppose, scary. Just an acknowledgement that someone else was there. But yeah, definitely the upstairs didn't have a nice vibe to it at all. I'd say that's probably when I felt most in danger, when I did that solo walk alone. Don't know if that it's because I'm a woman and I was on my own. I'm not sure, but yeah, it didn't feel too comfortable up there on my own.
Do you think that has something to do with how the spirits would interact with you if you're either a male or a female?
I think so, definitely. So we've been to some other places, and particularly places where we know that women have suffered or have been murdered or raped or anything like that. If you're walking alone, it seems that they do sort of target you a little bit more. I would definitely say so. Some places don't like having men around because they either feel threatened by the men or, they have more of that interest in women. So, yeah, we've had a few places where we have noted that they're more particularly interested in making the women feel uncomfortable.
Do you have any? Because I know there's a team of 5 women on the Haunted Down Under team. Is there any men in the crew? Say the cameraman or the guys who run the lights, the cables, anything like that?
Yeah. So Hayley's husband Scott is actually our main cameraman. We've just taken on another cameraman, Jace. And every now and then, Briar's partner, Nick, will come and do some filming for us or some photography for us. So we do get the guys in, but it is definitely a female-led sort of show. But the guys do definitely get some of those experiences as well. Just recently, Scott actually saw something, and sometimes they'll hear the same things that we do, but yeah.
Do you mind telling us about some other encounters that you may have had?
Yeah. So, trying to think of some experiences. So there's just certain places where, we went to Mount Coosa in Brisbane, and it's known as Brisbane Suicide Forest. And there's a track that you can walk, and it's called the Ghost Coal Mine. So we've been down there a few times, and on the walk going down, I've noticed, because I've been in a few different positions walking down, whether it's first in the line or at the very back. And I've noticed that when you're at the very back, there's definitely a male presence there, and he likes to follow you down and let you know that he's following you down, because you can hear the footsteps and you can feel him behind you. And then when you get down to the Ghost Hole Mine, it's sort of like a little circular landing, and to the left of you as you come down is where an old mine had collapsed when workers were in there, and they had unfortunately died. In front of you feels like there is definitely a male presence, and he's not a nice man at all. And then there's also definitely some female presence there, and they're quite upset. And I've often heard women screaming or wailing and crying from that direction. So we think that some women had been taken in there and unfortunately raped or killed. And then you've got the man following you from the back. So in that area, you're a little bit surrounded. But then on the other side of the ghost hole track, there's a little walk you can do. And every time that we've been there, we actually haven't been able to walk that far down the track just because something's sort of letting us know, not to go further. And a couple of times we've actually had the feeling of being chased out of that area. And it's definitely a male presence that's there as well. So I remember the first time that I went there, this is probably one of the best experiences I've had, because it was the first time that I had actually seen sort of an apparition where I could make out a face and everything. Now, again, this is something where I'm a little bit more sensitive to it. So I might see it, but the other girls might not. So I suppose it can be a little bit hard for some people to believe. But as we were walking down this track, Briar actually said something, and I turned around to laugh, and then right behind her there was a really tall man standing there, and we had no men with us this night. There was a really tall man standing there behind her, and I can make out his face perfectly. He was like a perfect gentleman, dressed in like a tuxedo or suit or whatever it was. Very, very tall, thin face and everything. So I got a bit of a fright, and I let the girls know what had happened. And as we come out, that was when Briar told me the history of the place. So there was actually, in the 1920s, there was a man who had brought his fiancée down there, and he had shot her at close range in the head and killed her. And then he tried to poison and shoot himself, but he failed, and ended up going into the hospital and recovering and everything. But there's actually a photo of the two of them on the internet that you can find when you look it up. And Brian showed me the photo of the man, and it was 100% that man that I saw standing behind her.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that was a bit of a fright because I hadn't seen him before, and then for her to show me in the photo was pretty interesting.
And when you saw this man, you said you could see his face quite clearly, but was he a solid person? Was it anything like that? Because I've never seen a ghost in my life, so I can only go off, I guess, the images that I've seen, videos on YouTube, things like that, where it's kind of this whimsical, kind of transparent entity. Is it anything like that in real life?
I think it depends. So there's been other instances where I was actually down at the River Mill at the Gold Coast, and this is the first time someone had said to me that they think like I'm psychic, or it feels weird saying psychic, but have that sort of ability. And the man that I saw, he was further down, and he was getting me to follow him down to this area, but he was just a black figure, but I knew that he was there. But yeah, he was just like a solid black figure that I could see. But this man that I saw at Mount Coosa was, I think it gave me a fright because I sort of had to recount the group and remind myself that we didn't have a man with us, and that's how clearly I saw him. But just as quickly as he appeared to me, he then disappeared, and he wasn't like a full solid, couldn't see through him. So it was, I don't know, I've seen them in different ways. So sometimes we've seen like a misty sort of apparition. Sometimes it has just been a full black figure, and sometimes we have seen them as clearly as that man that I did see.
Is there something that you think might affect the way they're seen? Because you did say a little bit earlier that you might be able to see these spirits or these ghosts a little bit clearer than maybe the other members of your team. Do you think that's a large contributor to it? Or do you think they have almost a sentient ability to themselves to reveal themselves at, I guess, a way that they want to be seen?
I'm not actually sure. So there's definitely been cases where I have seen something, and Hayley has definitely seen something at the same time I have, because we both looked at each other at the same time and we've both been able to say exactly what we saw, but the other girls haven't seen it. And then yeah, there are times where it's only me that sees it, or someone will think they see a shadow going past. So I think partially, I think it may depend on how much energy they have built up. So we might find that progressing through the night, they're sort of showing themselves a little bit more, or they're becoming a little more clearer in their in what they're showing us. So there is that theory of them building up that energy, and sometimes we will try to help them with some technology that we have, or we might say, like, you can take some of my energy to manifest or do something. So I think that's definitely a part of it, is how much energy they've built up. And then sometimes I think some of them just, because you've got the intelligent and the repetitive hauntings, and sometimes I think it is just, some of them just are repetitive. They don't actually realise that they are sort of showing themselves. They're just going about doing what they're doing because that's all they know, sort of thing.
Are you able to explain the difference between those two types of hauntings?
The intelligent hauntings are when people, when spirits, are able to communicate with you and sort of do things that you ask. So every now and then we might knock on something and ask for a response that way. More recently, we went to a location and I whistled because I felt something was around. I heard something. So I whistled a tune and the girls heard it whistle back to me. So there's things like that that make it a little bit more intelligent. They sort of, do try to communicate with you, do try to let you know that they are there. And then the ones that are more repetitive, it's I think the best way I had it described to me is to describe it as if it's a broken record player, where it just keeps replaying the same thing over and over without actually knowing that that's what it's doing. It's just stuck in that sort of loop. And so it might be that at the same time every night you hear a knock on something, and it's that one particular knock. It won't respond back to you if you ask it to do it again. It's just stuck in that sort of repetitive loop.
And with those, do you think there's a certain event that might happen to these spirits that cause them to, I guess, get caught in either of those classifications? So maybe it was a way the person originally died, and that spirit is maybe just reliving that moment over and over. Is there anything like that you've, I guess, found in your investigations that kind of causes them to be one way or the other?
I don't think we've actually been able to put it down to a certain reason, but I would definitely say that it may have something to do with the way that they died. So if they did die a particularly gruesome or unfortunate death, then maybe they are able to be a little bit more intelligent with their haunting. Or I think if they were a particularly nasty person, that may just be something that they're now, I don't know what different people's beliefs are on the afterlife, but if they're stuck roaming around, then they may sort of be a little bit more intelligent, because I'm not entirely sure, actually. It is something that I would like to particularly look at, but it seems that a lot of the spirits we have communicated with, if we have been able to marry up their death with something that we've read, like a newspaper article or something, it does seem like they're able to communicate about that. So, for example, we were somewhere recently and there was a man that had been shot by a pistol, and when we were using the oracle box to communicate, the word pistol had come up a few times. Or, there was a woman talking about, I rescued you and things like that. So there's little things like that that do make us wonder if it is sort of linked to the way that they died is what they're communicating with us.
It's simply fascinating to hear this from someone who, I guess, does this almost as a real job. It's quite interesting. Have you ever encountered a spirit that's evil or has a negative connection to it?
Yeah, definitely. So there's one, any of our viewers probably would have seen a few of the videos, but there's a particular tunnel in Victoria Park that we've been to a few times, and we've filmed a little bit there and uploaded the footage. But there's a man there, and he's not particularly a nice one. definitely when he's around, he gives off a very oppressive feeling, and he's another one that's sort of a little bit more nasty towards the women. So he has audibly, so Hayley and I have both heard it at the same time, and we have also caught it on our recorders and submitted it as EVP evidence. But he has called all of us women the C word individually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he's called us sluts, and there's some video evidence, EVP evidence that the girls have uploaded, and it says, you know, F you all, you're going to die. He says some pretty nasty things.
Oh, that's
There's
shocking.
definitely some nasty ones out there. Yeah.
What do you do about something like that? Do you have ways that you can maybe cleanse a spirit, or is that just something that you just kind of leave alone and you try to avoid?
We sort of try to, I think because we know that they're there, we do try to communicate with them a little bit to see if we can find out a little bit more, or we will sort of stand out. If we feel threatened, we will stand our ground and we'll say, look, you know, you can't actually touch us, you can't hurt us. But at the same time...
Is that like a rule that you try to set?
Yeah. So we do. There have been times where we have been touched, or like I've been scratched, so we will sort of stand our ground and say, you can't actually hurt us. So we will communicate that with them, but there definitely have been times, so particularly at this tunnel, where we said, no, okay, we can't be here anymore. It's actually becoming dangerous for us to be here. So another example of that is when we were at Mount Cruiser Forest, and it's that track that we can't walk down. We have just said we actually fear for our safety right now, and we've just had to decide as a team to leave.
I honestly, I wouldn't even know what to do in a scenario like that. I think I'll be the first one to hightail out of there, but
it's hard not to.
Yeah, because I mean that's my next question is how do you kind of I guess suck up the nerves and just kind of stick through it?
That is pretty tough, and I'm the newest member to the group, and it is something that I am trying to learn. Like, some of the girls seem like, oh gosh, they're so tough, nothing could break them. But I have definitely seen them get scared. So like there are definitely things that get to them, but I think you sort of become desensitized to it a little bit after time. So as a day job, I'm actually a nurse, and there are things that I'm desensitized to. So I guess it just becomes like that. Like, there are definitely frightening things that happen. I don't think I will ever stop being scared. And I think because it is so new for me, it is like I do get scared very easily. And I make it quite obvious when I am. But you also... sounds a bit weird, but it's almost like an adrenaline rush when it happens, and you just sort of want to check it out even more. So we do get scared, but we're like, oh my gosh, that's cool. Let's go and check it out and see what other evidence we can get from this.
Yeah, of course. It's kind of like a thrill junkie, really, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I would definitely describe us like that.
Well, Selene, I want to thank you for coming on the show, because everything that you said it's kind of all new to me, because before we jumped on the air, I kind of told you we don't really get a huge amount of ghost stories or hauntings or anything like that. So it's really good to, I guess, get some information from what I would call a professional in that field. So it's really enlightening for me, and hopefully it's been enlightening for our listeners as well, because, I mean, I've learned a lot tonight. Yeah,
well, like I said before, it's one of those things where it's hard to believe unless you experience. And I've had people say to me, you know, ghosts aren't real, and it really doesn't bother me if they say that. Like, I know for a fact what I've seen. Some people might think that I'm crazy, but I love doing it. And I think if anyone wants to go and pursue it and have a look for themselves, definitely go and do it. It can be a bit of fun, and the things that you see or hear might surprise you.
And that's going to do it for tonight. And remember, if you have had an encounter, get in touch with me. My email address is believe@ccradio.com.au, or you can message me on Facebook, and that's facebook.com/believe UFO radio. Until next time, stay safe, and you've been listening to Believe Australian Paranormal and UFO Radio.